Talkin Giants. Really excited to talk to him about all things Giants. And thank you for joining me, man. How you doing?
Now, Chris, what's going on? I'm happy to be here. You know what? I'll say this. I'm taking off tomorrow. I'm a big Scream fan. So Scream 7's coming out tomorrow. So me and my
There
buddy,
you go.
2 p.m. tomorrow, little matinee, I believe they call it. So I'm excited for that. And then, of course, in just a little over a week's time, around a week, we're going to be able to say that our favorite football team, the New York Football Giants, that they're hopefully going to be getting a little bit better because they're going to be adding some free agents. Obviously, the scouting combine's going on too, so seeing Sonny Styles just be an athletic freak, which is
Oh
rare for
yeah.
sometimes these off-ball linebackers. A lot of times, the off-ball linebackers, you talk about these guys not being able to be all that athletic, and you got to look at their film. Nice thing with Sonny Styles, apparently you're going to be a really good athlete, and you're going to get maybe a good prospect there. I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on. I just gave you a bunch of different things in the span of 45 seconds.
Of course, man. Yeah. Again, thank you for joining. And it's kind of funny because obviously listening to you over the years on Talking Giants and stuff. I know that you've been a season ticket holder for many years. I think you
Hmm.
just kind of gave up your seats because of covering the team and stuff. You guys are doing live streams right after the game and everything, so
Yep.
it's tough. But I wanted to kind of that's one thing we have in common. I've been a season ticket holder since 2021, and I haven't
Oh,
seen a
great,
ton of
great time. Great.
yeah.
You got a winning season there, and you
20
got a winning season in there.
I was gonna say 2022. We got to experience it. I go to the games with my brother, and 2022 the Colts game at the end of the year was really great. But I mean, give me some. Like what is it? What was it like? To be a season ticket holder back in 2011 and like 2012,
Yeah.
and those years that they were still the prime Eli days.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy because the thing that's unique about me and my trajectory as a regular season ticket holder is I literally grew up with this team, right? I mean, I start going as a regular season ticket holder. I start going to these games in '09, 2010, and that's still the last days of the old stadium. So still getting those vibes and that tradition, and going with my father, and then obviously winning the Super Bowl in 2011 as a 13-year-old, and that being my second Super Bowl that I've seen in my life. But I actually got to see like all those games. Like for whatever reason, the game that one of the games that sticks out the most is we were facing the Miami Dolphins with Matt Moore at quarterback. But the game where Victor Cruz has that touchdown in the fourth quarter, I think this is another game like a fourth quarter comeback game, where he has that, he catches that touchdown in the fourth quarter and he spins around like a defender as he catches the
Right.
ball, and then he goes in for a touchdown. So it's like there's moments like that, and with my father, right? But then you progress, and I'm like, all right, I go through high school. My parents actually wind up getting a divorce, so I start to go to games by myself and just with other people. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'm a teenager, like a full on teenager, and I'm in high school with this team. Okay, now I'm in college with this team. And now, okay, I am a grown adult podcaster who is thankfully gets to cover the team for a living, and also be a fan and also be a regular season ticket holder, all within the same spot that I was in as a 13-year-old watching the team win a Super Bowl. So I'm very thankful and privileged that I kind of got to grow up with this team. Maybe both of us over time started to look a little bit worse than what we did about 15 years ago. I think that's the one thing that we kind of unfortunately have in common with that. No, but it's I loved it, man. Through the tailgates, whether that be just one on one with my father, one on one with the buddy, or even when we started doing tailgates a couple years ago, and
Yep.
we got over 100, 150, 200 Giants fans that are joining us for some of these tailgates. The experience was always different, and it evolved just like I evolved, and I'll always be thankful for that time. And I'm not going away. I'm still going to be going back whenever I can and whenever it makes sense. But we gotta cover this team, man.
Yeah, I mean, you summed it up really well there. The kind of experience going to the games. I mean, the game you mentioned, the Miami game. I remember that was interesting because that was right after like the snowstorm. We got like a snowstorm, I think, in like
Yeah.
late October. I remember there was like snow on the side of the field and stuff. I remember that game well, just watching it on TV, obviously. But I mean, it's such a different experience when you go to the games versus watching it on TV. I mean, you feel. I just feel like you feel so much more kind of invested in the product when you're there every week.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, you're paying for it, but I mean, you're also just kind of there, and I mean, especially over the last few years, there's been some tough days. So hopefully, better days ahead with John Harbaugh now and everything like that.
Yeah. I also feel like I can see the game so much better. Part of being
Yeah.
a regular season ticket holder and where I sit, I'm in section 315 on the 30-yard line. So I get like I've always said I get the all 2020 the all 22 view before anybody else does. And it has made me kind of hate the modern day broadcast that isn't the Amazon Prime broadcast, the next gen, the next gen
Yeah.
that Prime
Yep.
Vision broadcast, because that you can actually see the whole field. Like the most important part of I think an NFL play from like a pre-snap basis is where are the safeties? Are they single high? Are they in cover two? Or are they in cover three? How many guys are in the box? And so many times on a conventional broadcast, you can't see how many safeties are going to be deep, and where guys are rotating from a pre and post snap basis, and that's exactly where quarterbacks are looking. So like the modern day NFL broadcast, I feel like it kind of it just is simply we got to follow the ball. We got to follow the ball. And I think it's not making NFL fans as smart as they can be while they're watching the game. And that's one of the reasons why I love going to the games, because I feel like I could understand it a lot better than even just simply watching it on TV.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I'm in 332 with my brother, so kind of corner of the end zone, and I certainly feel what you're saying about getting that all 22 view, and you definitely get a much better perspective than watching it on TV when you're at the game. Um, so I mean, listen, man, we got a ton to get to with the Giants. I mean, there's so many ways we can go. I guess the first kind of question is that I'll ask you and we can discuss is the Giants have these three free agents in house with
Mm-hmm.
Jermaine Illuminor, Cordell Flott, and Wandale Robinson. Which free agent out of those three do you think the Giants should prioritize bringing back?
Yeah, I think what I think they should do is Jermaine Illuminor for sure. I think the other two spots are more replaceable, knowing what they kind of have around them, right? I think slot wide receiver can always be somewhat of a very replaceable position, even if Malik Neighbors doesn't exist in this offense and they don't have this number one wide receiver. I still think that they could easily find a slot wide receiver, unless you're talking about a guy like a JSN, who actually made a transition to the outside this year. Or an
Right.
Amon-Ra St. Brown would be a better example. Like, unless you have like a one of one slot type of player, which Wandale Robinson is not. Cordell Flott, mostly a backup player for the first 3 years, a backup depth player. Maybe should have been a starting player a lot sooner, even in 2024. But considering their need to play Deontay Banks desire to play Deontay Banks because he's a former first round pick. It's probably why we didn't get to see him for as many snaps as maybe he should have been playing. Even in 2025, like they were trying to do this whole rotation thing. Like we're just hoping a prayer
Yeah.
that Deontay Banks will turn it around.
Oh,
And
it's,
with
it's
Paulson
terrible. It's
Adebo,
terrible.
and with the Debo, with the Debo there, like outside corner may not be this full on necessity. And also, you don't know if Cordell Flott can be just like a 1 year contract year flash in a pan type of thing. And considering his weight, is that really a type of player? His lightweight, is that really a type of player that Denard Wilson and John Harbaugh would want in the defense? But so that leads me to Jermaine Illuminar. I mean, this guy, I think number two lowest pressure rate, or it's in the top five, top six of lowest pressure rate among right tackles in 2025. I mean, you're talking about a top 10, definite top 10, top five pass blocking right tackle in the NFL. And I think he is a good enough run blocker. And he even came on our show and talked about like, hey, left hand up, hand up. I am going to be a much better pass blocker than run blocker. But I think I value that so much more, considering like if you're a bad, disastrous right tackle as a pass blocker, then you're allowing sacks that quarterbacks are losing 6, 7, 8 yards. Sacks are drive enders. And like we're not just talking about like a middle of the road Mike Remmers, like, oh, this guy can kind of just get you by on a year by year basis. You're talking about Jermaine Illuminor, who finally that he's been able to lock down at right tackle and focus on one spot and not practicing here. And but Evan Neal's going to get the job, and he has to lose it or get hurt, and then you could slide over to right tackle. Oh, we're going to pull you, and you're going to play guard for a couple games here. That's kind of what Jermaine Illuminor's career has been. He's finally locked in at right tackle, given the starting job. You can practice at right tackle. You can get better at right tackle. You can mentally prepare for right tackle. And you've seen the best football of his career, even at age 31, 32. And I don't see a reason why it would get dramatically worse from here. I don't know how much better he can get, but I don't see a reason why it would get like dramatically worse. Maybe the only argument, I'm being a little pessimistic, is that this is the first time in a long time that he won't have Carmen Brasillo as his offensive line coach. So then what would it look like? But then also you can make this argument for 4 other guys that are on the team as well. I do think they have to prioritize Jermaine Illuminor, because don't just create a hole for the purpose of creating a hole. A massive one.
Yeah, we saw it in 2022, 2023 with Evan Neal. A really bad right tackle, any kind of tackle, can just nuke an offense. I mean, the Giants were at a point with Evan Neal in those years where they just couldn't function offensively because their right tackle couldn't block. Obviously, we had the Josh Azudu disaster when he came in 2023 and all those things. So completely agree with you that right tackle is a huge need for the Giants. They need to prioritize it, especially protecting, Jackson Dart, second-year quarterback. I guess my question for you is, what should the Giants look to do on the interior of the offensive line? There's a lot of names that, if Illuminor is going to be the right tackle, and we both kind of agree they should look to prioritize bringing him back. Some of these names like, Wyatt Teller's a name that obviously has a connection to the offensive line coach that they brought in from Cleveland, although it was a one-year thing and the O-line wasn't very good in Cleveland, but there is a connection. Elijah Vera Tucker's another name. Do you think that, obviously last year the guard spots were Runyon and Greg Van Roten, do you think that the Giants should look to upgrade both of those? Because Runyon as well has the situation where you could cut him, you could save $9 million against the cap. What do you kind of think the Giants should do on the interior of the offensive line? And in connection with that, the Tyler Linderbaum situation. Obviously, John Michael Schmitz is under contract, but they've been connected to Linderbaum, but the contract could be a historic contract over $20 million a year.
Yeah, me personally, I am rooting for, and what I would do is I would prioritize right tackle first, and then go to the interior. And that's not to diminish the value of a center. I guess maybe it is diminishing the value of a guard a little bit, but I just think tackle is a more important position to cover up first and make sure that you have your bases covered. And I do not think the answer here is just, let's just let Marcus Bowe rock and roll at right tackle, and then we could pay Tyler Linderbaum 18, 19, 20 plus $20+ million per year. He is going to probably reset that center market. That's not how I would choose to build this. I think the Giants' offensive line is at an interesting point right now where, I think it's good. I think it's solid. I don't know if it's going to get to that spot in 2026 where it's kick-ass. But it is very, very important this offseason that I think you don't go into the season with, oh my God, we're just going to put hope and a prayer on somebody. We're going to put hope and a prayer on Marcus Bowe at right tackle to just kind of, figure it out in second-year jump. Maybe he'll just get better and stronger. Right guard, coming in with some sort of plan that's not putting a young player in the line of fire, whether that is they're not taking a guard in the first round, whether that is somebody that they take in the second round. They don't have a third-round pick right now. And then you're talking about a possible day 3 pick. I don't think they would do that, but I love the idea of bringing in a Wyatt Teller in here. If they want to invest a little bit of money in a guy like a Zion Johnson, who honestly that's a guy that I would have to watch more. I'm going to watch more film on when it comes to Friday and then this weekend and then next week. But he's a younger player from the Chargers who obviously has the Jim Harbaugh tie. They seem to just sister swap and wife swap between coaches and players.
Even coaches, Greg Roman, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they did the Odafe Oweh trade last year. He was a former Ravens edge rusher. Now he goes to LA. So they do the wife swap of players and coaches and everybody literally all the time. I mean, Joe Ortiz is the freaking GM, for crying out loud. So I'm looking out for him too as like a younger option if they want to pay a little bit more money and see if they can find somewhat of a permanent answer. I am all for of supplementing with veterans, whether that be a Wyatt Teller, even bringing back Greg Van Roten for another year, who has seemingly brought a lot of energy to the offensive line this offseason, despite him being an impending free agent. He has been the guy that's kind of garnered and gathered the offensive line to get there at Harbaugh's press conference and to get players there and to kind of show energy for that. I think he wants to be here. He's a local guy. Even if it's those supplemental pieces on the inside, right? And then what that allows you to do is when you have those answers via free agency, that maybe not permanent answers, but they are answers, right? What that allows you to do in the draft is if there is a player that is a high-end traits player on day 3, because again, You don't want to force that pick in round 2 if you don't have to. But even in day 3, if there is a high-end traits player, because that's where they have most of their picks, then you could take somebody who is a tackle or a guard or an offensive lineman that you want to develop over time, and then you are not forcing them to play from right from the jump. Of course, there's chances for injuries and those guys can get in. But that is the position of strength that I want to be in, instead of, oh my God, we didn't bring back Jermaine Illuminor. And okay, maybe we prioritize Linderbaum and center in the interior, but what are we doing at right guard? And then are we having a day 3 raw Marcus Bowe, who is starting at right tackle, who allowed a lot of sacks and a lot of pressures and very limited action last year? So I'm a little worried about the offensive line if Jermaine Illuminor does not come back, because I just do prioritize that right tackle spot a lot more.
What is your take on the Linderbaum stuff? I mean, it looks like it was announced at the combine. The Ravens have apparently given him a record-setting offer, which would,
Yeah.
or a market-setting offer, excuse me, which would be around that 19, 20 million a year. I know Creed Humphrey got around 18, I think. If the Giants, give Tyler Linderbaum a 4-year, $88 million deal, let's say, where it's 20 plus million a year.
It's 22.
22. I mean, what would your thoughts be on that? I mean, I don't really foresee them being able to do Illuminor and Linderbaum.
No, I don't think so.
Don't see that. Yeah, but I mean, what would your thoughts be if the Giants invest $20 million in a position that, is not necessarily a premium position?
Listen, man, he is a kick-ass player, and there is a lot of polarity, I think the word may be, on Linderbaum right now. Because Ken McCusick goes on the Big Blue Banter podcast after Harbaugh was hired, and literally his name is Film Study Ravens, Ken McCusick, and that's a guy that's watching every single Ravens game and breaking down film and breaking everything down, and he goes on their show and says something along the lines of that he's a little bit of an overrated player, and especially if you hear that from a fan that watches every single game, that worries you, right? But then at the same time, you look at some of these metrics, and you look at overall pass blocking efficiency, which I do like. Hey, we're going to promote Jermaine Illuminor and say how good Jermaine Illuminor is, and we're going to use pass blocking efficiency as an example. Tyler Linderbaum is still pretty high in pass blocking efficiency among centers. He's still a kick-ass player there, but the pressure rates are very, very high. How much of the pressure rates influenced by bad guard play? And man, over the last 2 years, since Kevin Zeitler has kind of left the Baltimore Ravens, I believe John Simpson, who is now with the New York Jets, or used to be with the New York Jets, was also there a couple years ago too, and that was much more stable guard play. And now you have Andrew Voorhees and Daniel Falele over there in Baltimore, who they're not very good at all. How does that inflate pressure stats for centers? I think it would inflate them a good amount, because it's very rare that I think you actually see centers, unless they're lining up against a nose tackle. It's very rare that you're actually seeing centers go up against 1v1 against somebody, right? So how do you assign pressure rate for centers? I think it's the most complicated position to kind of assign who wins and who loses there, right? But regardless, he's a kick-ass run blocker, and that would make me feel really good about having a really athletic offensive line. Runyon's a good puller. Thomas is athletic as hell. Linderbaum is really athletic, and then I don't know what you do with JMS. Maybe he goes to guard, or I don't know. If they want to prioritize getting a kick-ass player on the offensive line, I am never going to be like, I really think they should have allocated these resources there. Again, I would prioritize Illuminor, but right. I don't think I'm going to be really upset if they get Tyler Linderbaum, because then you're getting a player that at least has the reputation of being one of the best players at his position, if not the best. And what it's going to come down to is I'm going to watch the film next week and try and get some answers on, is this guy actually worth over $20 million? Because if you are having disaster plays as a pass blocker, for me, it almost doesn't even matter how good of a run blocker you are. You cannot have disaster plays as a pass blocker.
For sure. Another one of the free agents the Giants have, obviously, is Wan'Dale, and we got a comment here that I'm going to try to show on screen. And thank you for the comment. If Wan'Dale isn't re-signed, should they draft 2 wide receivers in the draft, a number 2 wide receiver, and another slot? Obviously, they're probably not going to be able to re-sign Wan'Dale and Illuminor. In your mind, Justin, do you think that the Giants need to come away from this offseason, whether it's tight end, receiver? Do you think they need to come away with a true number 2 weapon, even irrespective of Wandale? Or do you think that they can make it work? Malik Neighbors is the alpha number 1, kind of like Seattle did with JSN, all kind of flows through him. They had other weapons, of course. Cooper Kupp probably going to the Hall of Fame. But, I mean, do the Giants need a number 2 weapon? Or do you think that if they bring in a player of similar kind of ability to Wandale, they'll be able to make it work if the O-line is prioritized?
Yeah, and again, like how are we defining number 2? Like we're defining number 2 and slot wide receiver as different things, right? Like, which I think I define it as that. I think you're defining it as that. I think slot is a lot more replaceable. Again, like 2022 Giants got by with Richie James, and
never forget.
At least the 2022 version of Richie James and the 2024 version of Wandale Robinson. I understand Wandale Robinson has more catches, but somebody like a 2022 Richie James is more effective, right? Now, I don't think that's fair to Wandale Robinson to compare him to what that 2024 offense had to be at times with those quarterbacks that they had throwing the ball. I think 2025 is more reflective of the player that Wandale Robinson can be. But again, if you're going to prioritize one spot more, in a perfect world, I would like to prioritize outside wide receiver more. But then it gets down to, well, who is that guy going to be? Because if you go into the draft, and I think this is horrible, horrible philosophy. If you go into the draft and you're not going to we're not going to take Carnell Tate 5, or we're not going to take Jordan Tyson 5, right? Then you go into the draft and you're like, day 2 and day 3, we need to find our starting outside wide receiver for the 2026 season. Do not go into the draft like that. The Giants need to go into every year. Doesn't matter what year it is or what the state of the roster is. Every single year, the point of the draft is we are going into the draft to draft the best player at our given spot, right? And it's nice that the Giants need a ton of positions where it almost doesn't even matter what position you draft. Sometimes it does matter. Like, if you have so much depth at wide receiver, if you have so much depth here, then maybe it doesn't make sense of drafting a player like inside the top 50. But luckily for the Giants is that they have a lot of different holes, and they don't really have a lot of guys under contract. That's part of the reason why they have so much cap space in 2027. It's not because, Joe Schoen has managed cap so well. It's because he's had awful draft classes that we don't want to extend and pay anybody. So, don't pigeonhole yourself into saying, well, I need to get a wide receiver here. Well, I need to get I need to get an interior linebacker here. So I really don't know, wide receiver-wise, especially in free agency, the good ones just don't hit free agency. That's what it really comes down to. And the ones that do, like Alec Pierce is going to get over $20 million, man, for 50 catches. I understand he's an explosive play magnet, but for over $20 million, I don't know. Jawan Jennings, who's a kick-ass player, like a kick-ass run blocker, but he's probably going to get close to $20 million too. It's like Jawan Jennings and Alec Pierce, like this is really what you want to be paying $20 million to? So like a Malachi Fields in round 2. Like that could be like a really cool fit and a really awesome fit, and he killed it down to the Senior Bowl. But there could be an interior defensive lineman that I probably will like even more with that second-round pick instead of Malachi Fields. So they may just have to roll. And people are going to scream when they maybe hear this.
Don't say it.
You have to roll with Darius Slayton. You're paying him $12 million. And I still think that guy has something in him. I still think he has wide receiver 2 in him. I really think that he can go to a team. I mean, let's just use the Kansas City Chiefs. I was almost rooting for him to go to the Chargers last year. I was like, go catch a ball from Justin Herbert and watch your career get better. I still think that type of wide receiver 2 player can be in him. And I'm kind of rooting for it because the Giants may need to make it happen.
I've just seen too many big drops, especially being in the stadium. I've seen too many big drops and big moments. To me, they've got to find, and I agree with you, you can't go into the draft saying, hey, you've got to get a starter here. You want to have a roster.
I think that'd be crazy.
Of course, and you want to be able to supplement your roster in the draft versus, you don't want to go into the draft having a draft for need, is what I'm saying.
Correct.
And you've got to get to the draft and be able to say, okay, we feel good about a lot of these positions, and we can just take the best player.
Yeah.
But to me, they've got to find an answer at the number 2 outside wide receiver in free agency. I don't know who that is. Maybe it's a veteran guy who's not going to be maybe a long-term answer, but he could be like a 1 or 2 year guy. to me, if they go into the draft with Darius Slayton as their number 2, I'm not going to feel great about that, especially considering him and Dart, they didn't necessarily get on the same page last year. There was a bunch of plays that looked like they were going to be great plays, but they got called back because of penalties, or there was a few drops. So certainly that was an issue last year. So I we'll see kind of where they go with that.
Yeah. You know who I'm really intrigued by, and again, this guy's probably going to get money, but like if you want to invest in Jackson Dart and they have money to kick down the road, right? That's why like I don't want to sit here and be afraid of, well, the Giants can't get both of this guy and this guy. You're like, why not?
They've no one signed, as you said. They've only Doug Analytics had a great tweet about it. They only have, I think, what is it, like 8 guys under contract in 2 years?
Like they really can be more aggressive with. This is the point of having a young core, a nucleus, and a young core. That Joe Shane, the buzzword and the buzz phrase that they just keep saying over and over again. This is the benefit of that. Like Rashid Shaheed is a free agent.
I like him. To me, he's an upgrade. To me, he's an upgrade over Robinson. He can do more in the deep part of the field, in my opinion.
Yeah,
and he also handles special teams well, which under John Harbaugh is going to be a big thing. He's a great returner. So
yeah, but outside of him, then you're talking about besides Alec Pierce, Mike Evans. You're not doing Mike Evans. Romeo Dobbs. Like, how inspiring is that? Jawan Jennings, and then you get into Deebo Samuel, probably not. And again, I'm going through the NFL.com of like the top 101 free agents, and those are the wide receivers that I just listed. I think Deebo's the last one that's listed here. And like once you get past Deebo or Jalen Naylor's on here too, like do you really feel like that's properly acknowledging wide receiver 2? And are you going to pay Darius Slayton $12 million and a guy like Rashid Shaheed $15, $16, $17, $18 million as well? I think the answer at wide receiver 2 is a little bit more cloudy right now than people maybe think.
For sure. And Chris, thank you again for the comment. I'm just going to show this on the screen here. Talking about Sonny Styles. Sonny Styles is balling out at the combine. Wouldn't mind to see him at 5. In connection with that, and obviously, Justin, you know the Giants better than I do. I'll kind of give some takes and throughout this, and you'll let me know if I'm crazy or not. To me, inside linebacker, like 9 million dead, 9 million savings against the cap. I mean, to me, the Giants can't bring Bobby Okereke back again, can they? I mean, this is a guy who in the summer last year was like, is he even going to be a starter? Could he be like a surprise cut, kind of like Blake Martinez was in the a couple of years ago or a few years ago? Or to me, the room needs to be completely revamped. Is that where you're at? I mean, Sonny Styles, Micah McFadden, 1-year deal. To me, they need to totally revamp the room because, and we'll get to defensive tackle. I'm not really sure I see, maybe in round 2, but it's not the greatest defensive tackle free agency class. They have the worst run defense in football. And the way you fix that is you either get run pluggers or you go out and get a kick-ass linebacker, like you said, and Sonny Styles might be that.
Yeah, man. It's defensive tackle is another one of those positions in free agency where the really good ones typically don't leave, and then the ones that do leave, you kind of have to overpay for. But interior linebacker, and starting off with Okereke, yeah, man. I'm really glad you brought up the Okereke going back to the spring and summer stuff, because that was a huge talking point that I had about in season, about the Giants' self-evaluation, about their ability to evaluate what their roster is and what their roster needs and the players that are on their roster, right? They self-evaluated that linebacker room after having arguably the worst run defense in 2024. You want to know what they did to improve that run defense? They got 0 additional good inside linebackers. They didn't acknowledge that position at all. Chris Board, who is a special teams player, is not acknowledging the linebacker spot, and Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles is not acknowledging the interior linebacker spot. They said, okay. There were internal questions about Bobby Okereke. Art Stapleton did not come on Talkin' Giants last April, even though he kind of walked back some of those thoughts in camp once the heat around Bobby Okereke and his spot on the roster slowed down. He did not come on the show during OTAs and compare his situation to Blake Martinez for no reason. there were doubts within some people in that building on Bobby Okereke's effort. Remember the 2024 season
Oh, it was
before
a
Bobby
disaster.
Okereke
Yeah.
got hurt, where we're talking about his effort and how in it is he after a 2023 season where he broke out and he was so good. So there were people in that building like, I don't know about Bobby Okereke, and then he's just back, and then they make no other additions to that room. They lose Micah McFadden, who like wasn't, I think, is a good number two and good for his role, but then they didn't add anything else to that. And then you have one of the worst run defenses in the Super Bowl era, and the worst run defense I think since 2000, like allowing runs outside the tackles. So even though that is a position like Micah McFadden's an impending free agent. Bobby Okereke, you can cut him and you can save money. And then who do you have starting for you? You have no starters on your roster at interior linebacker. One of the positions on a football team that you need to have the most depth on because it seemingly is a spot where you just go through guys every single year. I still am in the spot where I would want to cut Bobby Okereke, even though they have nobody left. Because I'm with you. I just think they just need a new facelift. They need a complete facelift at that spot. And that's a spot where I would want to double dip in an ideal world. And why I think you would want to double dip, I think it's a rich interior linebacker class in terms of the guys at the top. Devin Lloyd, Quay Walker. You also have Leo Chanel. I would love Leo Chanel.
Me too. Me too.
Now, he hasn't played like more than 500, 600 snaps in his NFL career because you also have Nick Bolton and Drew Tranquill on the Kansas City Chiefs who are taking up good snaps and their linebackers too. But I think he's a guy that can be ready for that. I think considering that he's not a 1,000-snap guy, he's maybe a guy that could be a little bit more affordable instead of guys that log 1,000 snaps every single year. And this draft class is riddled with really good interior linebackers. Of course, Sonny Styles is the headline of it, but you also have Jacob Rodriguez out of Texas Tech. It sucks that you don't have that we don't really have a third-round pick. Maybe he's in play there. You have Kyle Lewis out of the University of Pittsburgh as well. I know from the University of Oregon, there's a good linebacker that has some good metrics too. So this is a really deep linebacker class. And I really love that the need for that this year is meeting the depth and the quality of the players that I think the Giants should be walking away with some multiple linebackers in free agency. I would like to bring back Micah McFadden because I think he will be affordable. But get like a high quality player and then try and walking out of this draft class with an interior linebacker that you feel good about and about his potential and his future.
It's going to be really interesting to see what they decide to do at 5 in the draft, just because, and kind of staying on the inside linebacker spot.
Yep.
I mean, Styles is just, he's an athletic freak. He's a freak in nature. And, it feels like he's got the size and the speed to be able to play that position. And it's kind of like a plug and play day one. He can step in and really be an impact player. And, it obviously fits a huge need for the Giants. So I do wonder if they will go that route. It's going to be interesting because he is a guy who has obviously risen up the boards. It was reported that I think the Giants have met with Styles at the Combine. Yeah. So it's one of those things where it's going to be really interesting to see if they decide to go that route at 5.
I'm actually checking right now. I don't know if he's run his 40 yet. I don't think he has because people would be going crazy about that.
I think I actually saw something earlier. I think he ran like a 4.47 was what he was timed at.
Really?
I think.
Really, man. I mean, you're talking about a player right now that at least his broad jump was tied 4th all time among linebackers.
Yep.
Vertical jump was the highest vertical since 2003 for anybody over 6'4", 4.47 40-yard dash. Yes. I mean, that, man, I am not buying if there's any question about like positional value or anything like that, because it's the same argument a little bit with Caleb Downs here. I mean, I think these guys that can get in there and stop the run and do multiple things for you, I think they're more valuable than ever, because especially in the day of age, just look at the Seahawks. In a day of age where you're trying to take bigger people off the field and put lighter, more athletic guys on the field to defend the pass, right? Is the number one priority and the number one job as a defense is to, I know a lot of teams will say stop the run, but I think the number one priority of defenses is to not allow opposing offenses to be explosive. If you're not allowing opposing offenses to be explosive, even if you're bad and weaker in some other areas, you can live and you can survive. So having a guy like Sonny Styles on the field, where you feel like he is your guy, he is your Mike linebacker, he is patrolling everybody around him, and you can take off another linebacker, and maybe you can put another safety, maybe you can put another corner, and this does coincide with what Denard Wilson wants to do. Like he was up there in those nickel and dime usages. He was up there with teams like the Seattle Seahawks of liking to take heavier guys off the field, taking linebackers off the field, and putting some of those more hybrid cornerback players on the field. So can you stop the run with the lighter guys on the field? And with a guy like Sonny, hopefully with a guy like Sonny Styles, if he's reaching his ceiling, and that answer is yes, that is extremely, extremely valuable. And like I said, kind of to start the show, what's crazy about Sonny Styles, Jack Campbell was a guy that didn't test well, right? He didn't run in a straight line well, and he wasn't explosive. But it was one of those things where it's like interior linebackers, you got to watch the film, right? Same thing with Leo Chanel. Leo Chanel I think that's one of the reasons why he fell in the combine. I don't think he tested very well, at least with his 40-yard dash and the straight line speed. But for both linebacker and safety, I almost don't care what you run on a 40, because it's about what you do up here. I don't care even if you are fast. That doesn't necessarily increase your draft stock to me. It's, do you play fast? Does your brain allow you to play fast? Does your processing allow you to play fast? And obviously that looks different from linebacker to safety, but I think both of those guys process really fast. And at least in Sonny Styles' case, man, is the athleticism such a great thing to complement with really good processing, really good ability to stack and shed, and a really good innate ability to find the football as well. So that's what makes Sonny Styles at 5 so fascinating. And for me, like, I do not have this clear and automatic choice of who I want at 5 yet. And it is mainly Sonny Styles that is kind of complicating that for me right now.
Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting what they do in the draft. You mentioned Denard Wilson, and obviously he has the background in Baltimore and in Philly of being a secondary guy, and working with the secondary, being a secondary coach in the past, passing game coordinator, all those things. To me, the Giants secondary, I'm really concerned about the secondary, like going into next year. Like, if you take Cordell Flott off the page, and I think it's been kind of reported that he's maybe the least likely of those impending.
He may get
free
paid
agents.
too,
Right, he may get paid, and he's might not fit the system. He's probably not going to be back. You look at the current starting secondary. It's you got Paulson Adebo, who's a guy who went out and paid, but then the second corner spot is it Deontay Banks? I'm gonna sell my tickets if Deontay Banks is starting next year at second corner spot, and then the safeties are Nubin and obviously Javon Holland. Then you have Phillips, who I kind of like as a nickel. But looking at these free agents in the secondary, to me the draft might be the best way to improve the secondary. I'm not really sure how they do it. Maybe you get a guy in free agency that you can kind of just plug in, like a veteran, like a Fabian Moreau. Well, I don't know his name, Fabian. Yeah, Fabian Moreau type guy. But to me, is the only way they're going to really improve that secondary through the draft, because I just don't love. We brought in Denard Wilson. Denard Wilson is obviously a guy who focuses on the secondary, and I don't like the Giants' current secondary.
Right. Again, I think at least adding one veteran that you feel decent about starting is necessary this free agency, so you're not going into the draft being like, we need to draft our starting outside corner. You know what I mean? And I feel much better about that on a year in, year out basis, that you could find a capable number 2 cornerback that is a veteran versus even a guy taking a guy in the first round. I just, not for whatever reason, I think as Giants fans, we have plenty of reasons to be scared of taking corners high in the draft and then throwing them into the fire and expecting them to do great. I can't even tell you the last time that actually worked out for the Giants. And it doesn't even matter the regime, the coach, the GM, right? I have this like fake fan theory. It's like a fake fan theory that I've said for years on Talkin' Giants, that if I'm running a team, I'm spending 40% of my cap on the cornerback room, because I just wouldn't even draft them. I just wouldn't even draft corners. So get a veteran free agent corner in free agency. There's two of them that are available from the Kansas City Chiefs. The Giants' current passing game coordinator is the previous DB passing game coordinator. He was working with the Chiefs secondary last year, and there's two guys.
D'Alessio. Yeah.
So there's two guys that are in free agency. One of them did not play in the 2025 season, so you got to take that with a little bit of grain of salt. But there's a couple guys available that they could get. And when it comes down to these safeties, I know you mainly talked about cornerback too. When it comes down to these safeties, like, obviously you take Caleb Downs at 5, and it's like, oh, well, we're really cooking there, right? But when it comes down still to these safeties, you invested a good amount of money in Javon Holland. You invested a top of the second round pick in Tyler Nubin. Like, I am not ready to just give up on those guys. If there's any position group on the team that I would look at the defensive scheme last year and I say, bad Shane Bowen, bad scheme, it is the safeties. Javon Holland, known for being a playmaker, yes, a little worried that it slowed down towards his the last 2 years in Miami compared to the first two, but there's still that in him. Tyler Nubin, especially, all the dude could do at Minnesota is touch a football and make plays.
Ton of interceptions, yeah.
And now he can't even buy. He can't even buy a pass defense, a pass deflection, for crying out loud. So I'm not shooing them away right now. If you get a defense coordinator in there that can maximize and know what to do with safeties and have safeties that can break on a football, I think there's a world where maybe they can do it. I just hope Tyler Nubin's confidence isn't totally shot.
What are your thoughts on Adebo overall? I mean, he got hurt last year. He had the MCL sprain, I think, in like the middle of the season. He missed maybe 4 or 5 weeks. Do you think he can be a number one corner?
Like a number one, like elite corner where we feel like we got one? Probably not.
Maybe just like maybe it's like a number one, like a good number one corner, not at the top of the level.
Yeah, I mean, he's a press corner that's very physical, and then what Shane Bowen decided to do last year for the early part of the year is, well, we're going to play man coverage in cover one, but we're going to put you 7 yards off the ball. I don't think that's how Paulson Adebo wins. I don't think that's how if he's going to make all the plays on the football, when he's going to get you interceptions and passes defensed, that's how he's gonna win. I think he's going to be a physical man corner. I think Denard Wilson's going to allow him to do that. The thing that gets me a little excited about Paulson Adebo is, even though he didn't play in all the games last year, do you know that he was tied for the league lead and dropped interceptions last year?
Really? I did not know that. That is encouraging. That is encouraging.
So, I mean, you got to figure, like, okay, he may drop a couple interceptions. There's a reason why they're playing corner, not receiver. But you got to think that maybe a couple of those will go his way next year, and instead of having a stat line of maybe 2 interceptions, a stat line of 4 or 5 interceptions certainly looks a lot better, right? So I think this system is going to utilize his strengths a lot more, but he is going to be a player that's going to get targeted a lot. He's probably going to allow some catches, and then he's probably going to get penalized. I mean, that's the player that he was at New Orleans. It's the player that you're going to kind of sign up for. But I would rather have a player that gets targeted a lot as like my number one corner. But if I feel confident that he can make a play on a football, force an incompletion, get an interception, like, number one wide receivers in the NFL are going to be targeted. That's the NFL offenses are built around getting the ball to their number one wide receivers. So I don't necessarily want this shutdown corner that quarterbacks never target. I want a guy that's going to make a play on a football, and I still do think that Paulson Adebo can be that guy for the Giants.
Yeah, one of the reasons I was excited when they signed him in the 2025 offseason was he's a guy who had interceptions in his career. You look at some of these guys the Giants have had in previous years, and they're like guys who never had interceptions. They're like guys who it's like, he's like Deonte Banks in college, didn't have a lot of interceptions.
Yeah, same thing with Flott. I mean, Joe Shane decided to spend his first 2-3 years here being like, I'm just going to get a bunch of guys that have never made plays on the football, and then finally was like, oh, maybe I should do the complete opposite. And it's like, yeah, man, that's a good move.
Yeah, you kind of need to. It would have helped to have guys who can make plays on the football last year when we were blowing 5 fourth quarter leads or whatever it was.
Yeah.
2 more topics that I want to hit with you, and then we can get out of here. This has been great. 2 of kind of the bigger names on the Giants, Kayvon Thibodeaux, Dexter Lawrence, both have been in the news the last few days with some of the comments at the Combine. I guess we'll start with Kayvon. it seems as the time goes on that he's more and more available for a trade. Obviously, he's entering the last year of his deal. Giants picked up his fifth-year option. He's in his last year. What are your thoughts on Kayvon in terms of, if the Giants could get a third round pick for Kayvon, should they do that? But can they even get a third round pick for him?
Yeah, if they can get a third round pick, that's something that I am doing. I mean, this you're talking about a player who I think Kayvon Thibodeaux is a good player, and I think he's getting better. And I think drafting Abdul Carter kind of lit a fire under his ass, and also wanting a new contract, I think right now is inevitably lighting a fire under his ass. If any of us are working for a new contract at work, that would also light a fire under us, right? So I think it's the same thing with him. But if you can get a third round pick for a player that has missed a lot of games over the last 2-3 years, right? I would do that. And we're talking about a player who, the 2026 price tag doesn't really scare me of $15 million. Okay. You're talking about a good player, a former first round draft pick. Like, I still think that is a cost controllable. Also, the fact that it's 1 year, like, we're not talking about a player that we have a 3-year commitment to. I'm willing to have a good player on a $15 million price tag. So of course, if you trade Kayvon Thibodeaux away, another team will take on that cap charge, and that frees up $15 million for you to be more flexible to do what you want. But what interests me way more than freeing up money right now is you get rid of a player that is $15 million on your books this year, and then you're going to be taking him off your books because you're not re-signing him, right? And when you re-sign Kayvon, you're going to have to pay him a good amount of money. But you're also drafting a player that you can have on the cheap for 4 years and the cost controllable player for 4 years. That's what I really like. And like that number of a third round pick, if we're just using that number for an example, that's the reason why the Giants don't have a third round pick this year is because you traded, for Jackson Dart. You traded up in the draft to get Jackson Dart, and that would kind of fully complete and add a third top 100 pick. It is so crazy and scary that, like, the Giants only have 2 top 100 picks in this year's draft. Like, sitting there after that round 2 pick, sitting there all of Friday night, and then waiting until Saturday at noon for when they're going to have their next pick. That is going to be a long, long time. And that is going to be a lot of good players that are going by. Kayvon Thibodeaux, and trading him or not trading him will not be the sole reason why the Giants don't have a third round pick. They can trade back from 5. They can trade back in the second round. There are different ways that they can find that third round pick. But I mean, even if it's a 4th round pick, that a team that's picking on the top end of the 4th round, which I do think that's a huge difference. If you're a team that's picking in the top end of the 4th round versus a team that's picking at the end of the 4th round, that would be even a very big difference for me too. And I would still think about doing that. If Kayvon Thibodeaux was this perfectly healthy player and I knew that I can get him for 16, 17 games a year, maybe a different conversation. But him being so unreliable injury-wise, would almost rather go into the year with a player on the cheap for 4 years and then just a better idea of what that edge room could look like. I also do like Chauncey Golston too.
It's one of the few rooms on the team they actually have depth in. Golston last year, I thought when he played, he missed 7 weeks or something with like a neck injury. But when he played, I thought he was effective. He was effective in the run game. I thought he was good. And I think he can be that third edge. Do you think that Abdul Carter was kind of freed up when Kayvon went out? Because I understand Carter's not your traditional edge, right? He's more of a chess piece. You can line him up over center. He can, he had a sack late in the year where he did a spin move, I think in the Viking game on their center. But do you think that the 3 of them can coexist kind of in a pass rush? Because it did seem like, and maybe it was just kind of Carter, growing up a little bit to, getting his legs under him as the season went on. But it did seem like when Kayvon went out, and I think he went out in like the Bears game, he missed so it wasn't exactly, the last 4 or 5 games when Carter really came on. But it did seem like Carter was a little more comfortable as that starting edge. Is there anything to that, or is it just kind of Carter getting better as the season went on?
Yeah, that's a great question. Ironically enough, Kayvon's last game was against the Bears, right? That's week 10.
Yep.
And then he goes on to have, let's see, what's 5, 6, 7, 8? What's 23 minus 8?
15.
He goes on to have 15 of his 23 quarterback hits after week 10.
Yeah.
And
I mean the last 5 weeks
and all of
probably
his
even
sacks,
better.
all of his sacks too.
Yes, because he only had like I think half a sack at that point.
Yes. So yeah, 3.5 out of his 4 sacks. Wow, that's I have never looked at these splits. He had the crazy 5 quarterback hit game against the Chargers, and then no quarterback hits until week 11 against the Packers. Kayvon Thibodeaux exits the game. Week 10. His snap share and his snap percentage goes up to 89, 91, 69, 80, 90, 88, 94.5 against the Cowboys.
Yeah.
The first half of the year, 54, 75, 79, 73, 69, 70, 64. Even 59 against 49ers, even though they kind of got blown out. Wow. I have never, like I was going to say initially, yes, I think that they can coexist. They did put Abdul Carter a good amount at this off-ball linebacker spot and rushing the passer from the A gap. They did a really good job of how are you going to get all 3 players at this on the field at the same time? Well, they got all 3 players on the field at the same time. But there is a question of, even though Abdul Carter was 7th in the NFL in total pressures this year, I mean, there is a question on, I think you're going to be way more productive as a pass rusher if you can just line up from the edge. Instead of like, okay, are we going to put you here? Are we going to put you there? Get a guy a little bit more comfortable with rushing the passer from the most optimal spot of rushing the passer, right? That is a great call that I think is maybe even worth looking into for Abdul Carter.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like you're watching the season at the beginning of the year, especially week 1. I think back to against Washington, and it's kind of new that they're doing this the NASCAR package that, Giant fans, obviously, we remember those 2010, 2011 days when they had the 4 pass rushers, Tuck, all those guys. But it just never felt like it worked, really. Like, it always was like, okay, like, now it's an early down, so we're going with Kayvon on the edge. And now, okay, it's a pass rushing down, so we got to get all 3 of them out there. And, it kind of felt obvious what Abdul Carter was going to do every time he was on the field on a 3rd down. It's like, all right, 3rd down, here's the pass rush specialist. Like,
yeah, what are you going to drop him in the coverage?
Right, of course. And Abdul Carter was 3rd overall pick. He's a really extremely gifted prospect. He's obviously more than a pass rushing specialist, and it just kind of felt like when he was given the reign, when his snap count increased, part of it's just playing more snaps. You have more opportunities.
Right.
But it was something that I just kind of wanted to talk through because it was like, Kayvon goes out and all of a sudden Abdul Carter starts playing better.
I mean, I never fully thought of it like that because the only thing that everybody was talking about, especially you get to that Patriots game, right? Which it's the, he goes out that Chicago game and then you have the Green Bay and the Lions game, which in the Lions game, he did have 3 QB hits that game, by the way. And then you get to that Patriots game, and then it's a whole conversation on Abdul Carter and his effort and his practice, and that's in sleeping in meetings. And that's where the conversation went to. And then that New England game, he finally gets his first sack. That was a cheapo first sack, by the way. Washington game, I think he legit gets like his first sack. And then he has these really good last 3 games of the year where he has 9 quarterback hits and a sack and a half in the last 3 games. And he just looks a lot better, and he's ending plays and actually finishing plays, right? So that is a really, really good call by you.
Last one, Dexter Lawrence, is probably the the best player on the Giants. You could argue, he's probably the most talented guy. He's got probably the best resume up there, on the team. Let me ask you this about Dex. Do you think that there's any chance that Dexter Lawrence is participating in training camp if his contract is not amended or he is extended?
I think he is. I don't think Dex is going to be the type of player that he's going to sit out. I think if it was that bad, we would have maybe heard something by now. But that still doesn't mean, at least in my head, Chris, because I can't wrap my brain around how a player that got 9 sacks in 7 games got half a sack in 17 games. I cannot wrap my brain around that. I understand you're going to be the first to hear from me about how sacks are volatile. And, 1 year, a guy could have 30 quarterback hits and have 15 sacks. The next year, a guy can have 30 quarterback hits and he can have 6 sacks. It just happens like that in the NFL sometimes. Like Abdul Carter was top 7 in the NFL in pressures. Brian Burns was not close to that. Yet Brian Burns is a guy that gets 16 and a half sacks, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you just find yourself in the right spots, and that's football, baby. And there's nothing to quantify it. There had to be something else going on with Dexter Lawrence in 2025, whether it was playing weight and being in shape, whether it was the elbow injury. But come on. We're going from 9 sacks to a half a sack, and an elbow injury that was stemming from training camp is the reason why. Talking about advanced stats, like we were talking about with like Jermaine Illuminor a little earlier in the episode, like pass rush win rate and a lot of these stats and overall like efficiency. Like Dexter Lawrence is still like a top of a lot of these stats for interior defensive linemen. So why did he not produce? And you watch, and especially towards the latter part of the year, I kind of took time to intentionally and only watch him because what else is there for me to watch right now? And it just looked like there are some plays where he's in it, and there are some plays that he's taking off. I think there was something intentionally like going wrong up here, and I'm pointing to my brain with Dexter Lawrence, and I think it's money-based. I think the incentives that Joe Schoen gave him to kind of start the year, I think a lot of us at the time looked at it as, oh, well, that's all right, goodbye Joe Schoen, kind of just giving Dexter Lawrence a bone. And hey, if Dex kicks ass as a player again, he's definitely going to earn a lot of these incentives, right? Getting double-digit sacks and blah, 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 blah. Winning games, whatever. He might have viewed that as a slap to the face. He's 11th, I think, as of now in AAV for interior defensive lineman in the NFL. He may view that as a slap in the face. And if Dexter Lawrence is going to be a zombie out on the football field, Chris, I don't want him here. I want him here. But if Dexter Lawrence is here, and if he's going to kick ass and give effort and show up and be a dude, I want him here. If Dexter Lawrence is just going to go through the motions, that is at the point where I don't want him here.
Yeah, to me, it's kind of, the timing's not perfect on it because when you look at these teams and kind of the Jets did it last year with their fire sale trading Sauce Gardner and Quinn Williams, now is really not the time to trade Dexter Lawrence if you're the Giants because you're trying to, I know this sounds crazy, but you're actually trying to compete next year. Like you're trying to win football games next year. You brought in John Harbaugh as a 60-something-year-old head coach. You have a young quarterback in his second year. You just saw what teams have done with their young quarterbacks in second year. You're trying to win next year.
Yeah.
This was
They're not
3
going
years
out
ago.
next year to win 5 games.
Of course, and if this was 3 years ago when the Giants roster was pretty barren, with the roster that Shane and Dable took over, obviously there were some guys there that were drafted by Gettleman, but at that point, and I'm not saying I would have ever done it, I'm just saying at that point I could justify like, okay, you're rebuilding, you want to get picks, let's trade one of our best players for picks. Now, if you trade Dexter Lawrence, it's like you had the worst defense in football with him.
Yeah.
So if you trade him, then where are we? So to me, he's probably the most valuable player on the defense in terms of what you could get as a trade asset. But the reality is, maybe Abdul Carter's higher, but out of guys you'd actually consider trading.
Right.
The reality is, though, the Giants need Dexter Lawrence to kind of unlock the defense because I thought in a lot of games last year he was the missing piece. Like, if Dex could just have like a Dexter Lawrence performance that he had so many times during the last couple of years, we could have maybe closed a couple of those games out. So to me, they've got to figure it out. I just think the point you made is great. Something did not look right last year. And was it money-based? We'll never know. But it certainly might have been.
I kind of feel like I'm putting on my conspiracy brain with some of this stuff. But how many times, do we not talk about things as Giants fans? It's just like, this guy's fine. Oh, there's nothing going on here. And then finally, when crap hits the fan, we hear when it all ends, we're like, oh, well, this is actually what was happening. I hope that this isn't one of those cases. I hope that Harbaugh, I think at this point, Harbaugh and him kind of have to figure it out because I don't know. Joe Schoen gets a D+ rating from the Giants locker room, the lowest GM in the league. I don't know how friendly Joe Schoen and Dexter Lawrence are right now, but I think this is a grown man, John Harbaugh, being like, I'm putting my Super Bowl ring on the table right now, and I'm being like, brother, are you here? Because if you're not, and it's the same thing. do you love football? Do you love it here? Because if that answer is yes, then I need you here, man. I need you here. And if you're not here, then you maybe shouldn't be here. And again, Chris, like that's not me saying like I want him gone. I would just rather I would rather have Dexter Lawrence go somewhere else and kill it and kick ass than just be a zombie here and then us get nothing from him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's got to be all in or all out. He's got to be
Yeah.
all in or out. There's no kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. It did feel like last year he was kind of, on that fence. So I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Thank you for your time. I mean, this is a really exciting. This is normally the most exciting part of the football calendar for the Giants because you get these high draft picks and you're like, oh, we got Abdul Carter, oh, we got Malik Neighbors, and the fan base can get excited, and then the season starts. Hopefully, that's changing now with the new coach. But yeah, anything you guys are doing at Talking Giants that you want to plug at the end here, definitely do that.
Yeah, no, me and Sean are I'm really loving it with Sean. I think we're building up some good chemistry. So we're gonna have a lot of good coverage, a lot of coverage on socials as well. Breaking down some highlights, breaking down some stats, breaking down what you need to know about these new free agents that are gonna be coming in. We're gonna be doing live streams. I think that Monday night, the tampering period, whatever the dates are. It's not the new league year. It won't be official till Wednesday. But whatever that Monday night is, we're gonna go live and we're going to talk about whatever they do. So I'm excited for that. And then, we'll go to the draft, we'll go to the summer, and then I'm excited to get back on this football field during training camp and hopefully win some games.
Well, appreciate that, man. Thank you again for joining. Really
Yeah, thank
appreciate
you, Chris.
coming on. Thanks, man. Okay, so that was Justin Penik of Talking Giants. Really appreciate Justin. Yeah, gave me an hour of his time. Can't thank him enough for that. Yeah, so again, if you're watching the stream on YouTube, like the stream, definitely helps it out. We really appreciate that. And give us a like on social media. Give us a follow on social media. Chris NYY28 is the handle on all platforms. We'll be back next week to talk New York sports as always. Yankees, Giants, Knicks, whatever's going on in the world of sports. We'll be talking about it. So until then, have a great rest of your week, and I will see you guys again soon.